Go when you're ready.
1, 2, 3, go.
This is Ardith MacIntyre from Cranbrook Television. I'm talking to Joe Conroy, who's the Liberal candidate in the East Kootenay Revelstoke riding. Hi, Joe.
Good morning, Ardith.
Nice to see you. Well, Joe, the writ's been dropped and election fever is in the air, and all kinds of exciting things are going to be happening over the next 6 weeks or so. What do you see as some of the national and local issues that will be a part of the campaign, Joe?
Well, I think definitely on the national scene that we have to look at the economy and we have to address some of the problems that are seen in the economy. I personally feel that the problems that are being discussed among some sectors of the community are not as great as what they're trying to make them out to be. But nevertheless, we have to address ourselves to these matters. Energy, I'm sure, will be one of the big items on the national scene. And not only just energy and its supply, but the distribution and pricing of energy. Now, we have to seriously look at the situation at Petrocan versus the multinational oil companies in Canada, so that Canada is definite positive to have a input into the supply and distribution of energy in Canada. And it's my firm belief that Petrocan and Clark can't.
He certainly made some fairly negative statements about Petrocan in the last little while. Do you think that's going to hurt him right at the very beginning of the campaign, Joe?
Well, he's made positive statements, he's made negative statements, he's made non-committal statements. And right at this point, I don't think that even he knows where he stands on Petrocan, but we know where we stand, and Petrocan, Clark can't.
What about the issue of national unity, which is one that certainly Mr. Trudeau has been spending a lot of time talking about, the repatriation of the Constitution and national unity? Do you think that that's an issue that's more relative to Eastern Canada than it is to the West? Are people in BC going to be concerned about that?
I think you're correct. Pardon me. I think you're correct in assuming that it's probably an issue that is more prevalent in the East. However, I think that we in the West should be very, very concerned about it, because we want one Canada. More and more in the international affairs and trade and marketing and foreign affairs, more and more governments are wanting to deal with governments, and they want to know who the government is, and they want to know that the government is strong. And I think that national unity is a very important factor to us in the West. It even goes into the economics, because shortly after Lévesque was elected in Quebec on a separatist platform, the Canadian dollar dropped some 5 points on the international market. And if the people in the West don't think that national unity is an item, it is. And it's an item not only as a unified country, but as a strong economic country.
Right. Joe, what about...
May I
yes.
put a little bit more? It surprises me. I read a report in the paper yesterday that Joe Clark and the Tories, when they're speaking in southern Ontario on the campaign trail, they can go through a whole day, one whole day, without mentioning national unity and referendum. And how a person who is concerned about the future of Canada can spend a whole day campaigning in Ontario and not mention national unity and constitutional matters is beyond me. Now in Quebec, his candidates are mentioning national unity, and they're saying that they will negotiate sovereignty association. In the West, he's saying no sovereignty association, no separatism. And they're divided on that issue, and we are not divided. We are solid. There will be no separation. There will be no negotiation of sovereignty association, and we will... Again, Clark has come around and said that he will reintroduce legislation into the House to deal with a national referendum to combat the referendum taken by Quebec. However, during the debate on that bill in the House, he opposed it hammer, tooth and nail. And he's...
Joe, have you any indication from Ottawa as to when we might expect Mr. Trudeau here in the East Kootenays?
The only indication is the second half of his tour isn't confirmed yet, but it will be during the second half of his tour, which will commence. I think April 23rd is the date that they have now for him starting the second half of his tour, and sometime after that.
Joe, there was an announcement. I think you said it was confirmed yesterday, was it not? An announcement by the Department of Indian Affairs for some monies to be made available for recreational facilities up the valley.
Yes, I'm very pleased to be able to say that a commitment made, or a promise made by the Indian bands in the Invermere area when the construction was commencing on the sports complex up there, that the Indian bands indicated that they would try to get and contribute $30,000 to the capital cost of the skating rink. And through breakdown of communication and misunderstanding, this was lost in the shuffle. We had the Honourable Hugh Faulkner in a short time ago and got the parties together, the Indian bands, the Recreation Society, the Village of Invermere, and of course myself, and we were successful in renegotiating, coming up with terms, and the Indian bands announced last night that the Indian Affairs Department will be giving a $30,000 capital cost grant to the sports complex in Invermere.
Well, that's good news. Joe, what are some of the other issues that are of concern locally?
There are many. And a lot of them are small issues, and I have been working for a year and a half determining the issues, finding them, isolating them, and working on the problem. Now, the freight rate problem in Creston is one issue that we have been working on through the cooperation and the joint efforts of the Creston Valley grain growers and the Department of Transport, Federal Department of Transport, and the Federal Department of Agriculture, and promotion by myself and the grain growers and all combined people. We were successful in getting Creston designated as an area eligible for feed grain subsidies for shipments of grain out of Creston. And this is a situation that had gone on for some 3 to 4 years without success through the wrong channels. But once we had them on the right track, it only took a matter of some 4 or 5 months to clear the issue up. Now we have to also look at Creston and their general freight rate, and we have been pursuing that issue with the people in Creston, and hopefully that we will be able to come up with some formula that we can work on and get some action on it.
What about the diversion? Has that been talked about too much? Is it sort of a passé thing, or will that have any relevance in your campaign?
I think it'll have a bearing on the campaign for all candidates, and it's an important issue. And although some people might say that it has been talked about too much, we can never quit talking about it. It must be stopped. It's a senseless and unwanted project, and we have been successful since 1975. I've been publicly opposed to this. We have been successful in getting several federal ministers to speak out openly that they were opposed to it, and through the Hugh Faulkner's Department, Indian Affairs, he will be making representation to BC Hydro. Len Marchand has been making representation to BC Hydro and to the provincial government, and none of us can rest. We must keep it uppermost in our mind, or otherwise they're going to slip it in on us.
Joe, the Liberals haven't done too well in Western Canada in the last little while. What do you see as the plight of the Liberal in this next election?
I might remind you that in 1972, I think there were only 2 seats west of Ontario, possibly 3. 1974, there wasn't one newspaper west of the Lakehead that was in support of the Liberals. We successfully sent down 8 members from BC in 1974. We gave the Liberals a majority government. I should correct that, a minority, 1-seat minority government from Kootenay East in 1972. And we have never done all that well in the West, but our presence is here, it's important, and it has been a very strong and beneficial influence on the federal government, and I hope to be sitting as one of the Liberal members down there influencing federal government members in the next House.
Thank you very much. This is Ardith MacIntyre from Cranbrook Television. I've been talking with Joe Conroy, the Liberal candidate for Kootenay East Revelstoke riding.